And again, welcome to those attendees who are just joining us. We will start in just a moment as I'm going live on YouTube right now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the recording and we'll get things kicked off here. All right, thank you everyone so much for joining us for this free webinar, Economic Benefits of Mountain Biking in the U.S. My name is Candace Gallagher and I am the Director of Operations and Webinar Coordinator for American Trails. This is our 276th webinar in the American Trails Advancing Trails webinar series. And this webinar is being recorded. It includes real-time closed captioning in English and also offers free learning credits. And you will see a link to the quiz and the survey in the chat box. And you can turn on captions by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. And a reminder that if another language is ever needed, please just let us know. And attendees will receive a follow-up email from me within 2 days that will include a link to the recording, the transcript, the resources slide that will include the presenter's emails, as well as learning credit details. And would you consider donating to American Trails to help keep these webinars produced weekly and free to everyone? You can visit americantrails.org/join for membership and donation options. There's also the QR code on the screen that you can scan. And a special thank you to our Trail Champion members, including Trail Design Specialists, Pilot Rock by R.J. Thomas Manufacturing Company, Kansas Trails, VackerSign, and as well as Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. And I want to thank our webinar partners today that include iZone Imaging, the Professional Trail Builders Association, 5280 Creative, the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, the USDA Forest Service, as well as the Grisberger Fund. And the Grisberger Fund is a donor-advised fund that belongs to two regular working people who really love trails, and they encourage everyone to learn more about donor-advised funds and how to use them to increase support for American trails and the free education that we provide. And with that, I'm happy to introduce our presenters for today. We have Jennifer Clinton, goes by Jen, Senior Parks and Conservation Economist with the Trust for Public Land, as well as Mary Monroe Brown, who's the VP of Programs with the International Mountain Bicycling Association. So I'm going to pass controls over to Jen to get started.
Thank you so much, Candace. Just give me 1 second to get my screen share started. There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. We're going to talk to you today about a recent report published by Trust for Public Land, or TPL, in collaboration with the International Mountain Bicycling Association, or IMBA, called The Economic Benefits of Mountain Biking. So my name is Jennifer Clinton. I'm the Senior Parks and Conservation Economist at TPL. I do work out of TPL's Boston office, but I'm technically located on Cape Cod. And I'm joined today by Mary Monroe Brown, the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Engagement for IMBA. So if you're not familiar with Trust for Public Land, we're a national nonprofit that connects everyone to the benefits and joys of the outdoors. We've been working for just over 50 years to close the outdoor equity gap by creating high-quality parks in the communities that need it the most. We envision a USA and America where everyone can connect to the outdoors near and far. We partner with people in communities across the country to plan their conservation priorities, help fund their visions, protect the lands and the water that they value, and create parks and trails that they need to thrive. Our mission is to connect everyone to the outdoors. We recognize that access to the outdoors is a fundamental human need, but there's a significant outdoor equity gap in America. Over 1 in 3 people in the US, including 28 million children, don't have access to a park within 10 minutes of their home. But our work is closing that gap so everyone can experience cleaner air and water, healthier and more equitable communities, more connected neighborhoods, and a more resilient and livable environment for people everywhere. Trails are an integral part of that puzzle, and we know that great trails makes great communities. One of the hallmarks of a vibrant and healthy community is trails that gives everyone access to the outdoors for recreation and the ability to safely travel to everyday destinations by walking or cycling. TPL's four core commitments are health, equity, climate, and community. So our research projects and our projects on the ground try to reflect that while maintaining community at the center. And my team is called the Land and People Lab. We're a 25-person national team at TPL, and we consider ourselves a think and do tank, the research arm for TPL. We use best-in-class spatial analysis, original research, including economic research, and technical assistance to support TPL's field teams and our external partners to influence policy and practice and make the case for parks and trails and nature-based solutions where people need it most. I'm going to pass it to Mary to introduce IMBA.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. IMBA is a 501c3 nonprofit that has been leading the movement for sustainable, accessible mountain biking since 1988. Our mission is simple but powerful: to create, enhance, and protect great places to ride mountain bikes. We partner with communities to turn vision into trails, and we offer expertise on advocacy, design, and stewardship. Our vision is that everyone, regardless of geography or background, can access world-class trails, from backyard loops to backcountry adventures, with a focus on delivering trails close to home. For 2025, we have been working towards engaging 250 communities to expand access to all to diverse, high-quality, natural surface trail systems. IMBA is leading a movement of communities building and activating natural surface trail systems. With decades of experience, IMBA has been instrumental in developing trail systems across the United States through our network of trail champions, community leaders who understand the value that trails bring. The strength is twofold: the program side, which educates and provides resources to trail champions, from funding resources to travel management assistance, and the trail solutions side. We don't just build trails, we build capacity within communities to sustain and grow trail access. Our legacy is rooted in collaboration, and our continued success stems from deeply understanding how trails enhance quality of life and drive community outcomes. Whether a small town or a large city, trails have become a cornerstone of vibrant, livable places. IMBA is a trusted partner at every step of the trail development process, from initial advocacy and access efforts to final construction and long-term stewardship. We work hand in hand with communities to bring their trail visions to life. Our expertise spans 7 key phases: access, engagement, assessment, funding, planning, construction, and stewardship. This full spectrum support ensures that trail systems are not only built, but built right, with sustainability and long-term value at the core. We're here to help you build trails that last and transform communities. Jen?
Did it jump forward for you?
The economic impacts of outdoor recreation outpace the national economy as a whole, increasing the real gross domestic product, gross output, employment, and most significantly, compensation for that employment. The highest cycling gross domestic product since they started tracking in 2012. In Wisconsin, these numbers run high due to the largest U.S. bike company, Trek Bicycles, based in Wisconsin. I'll pass it back over to Jen.
Okay, so I'm going to get into the economic benefits report. This report was published in March, and the focus was on the economic benefits specifically of mountain biking. What we were learning in our work is that a lot of the data, the economic data on cycling focuses on the community as a whole. And that would include road biking, that would include e-mountain biking, e-biking. So we really wanted to take a deeper dive into what's been studied just on mountain biking and the natural surface trails. So we recognize that outdoor recreation is a huge economic driver in the US. The most recent data from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis shows that outdoor recreation accounts for 2.3% or $639.5 billion of the U.S. gross domestic product. Across all industries and all activities, outdoor recreation creates nearly 5 million jobs in the U.S., earning 293.9, I believe that's supposed to say billion in compensation. And so that data shows that nationally, cycling contributes 3.7 billion to the national GDP. But like I said, that includes BMX, e-bikes, mountain biking, and road biking. So with this report, published in March and available at this QR code on TPL's website, we wanted to do a couple things. First is a literature review. So we looked at studies published in the last 10 years in the US that were relatively geographically diverse. We wanted to capture both urban and rural, if possible, in our data. And we wanted to focus on the studies that had a pretty comprehensive view of what it means to be a mountain biking tourist. Studies that capture not just their spending on the biking itself, but also their bigger tourist profile. So what did we find? Across the studies included, we read just over 50 studies that fit some of those parameters. Ultimately, 13 studies were highlighted in the report that fit all of the parameters. And across those 13 studies, we saw that the average expenditure per visit for mountain biking tourists was $416 per visit. These values ranged from $104 per visit in Duluth, Minnesota, to over $1,000 in Shawamigan, Wisconsin. Mountain biking tourism also produces jobs. So across these 13 sites, we find up to 1,626 jobs were directly or indirectly created. And I say up to because the Duluth study captured a range. They estimated economic benefits based on potential visitation. So that if we're looking at the two ends of the spectrum, it was up to 1,600 jobs. And the employees in these jobs earned up to $54.1 million in wages and salaries. So we found that the spending estimates across all the studies varied based on the average length of the stay, the average size of the group, and the expenditure categories that were included in the study. Most studies included spending on mountain biking equipment like retail, rental, repair, maintenance, potential lift tickets or trail fees, transportation, if you're driving, paying for gas to and from the site, food, entertainment, other types of retail and lodging. And in our study, this was our distribution. This includes both the 13 sites that were included in that average expenditures, but also a couple of the special event locations, which are profiled in the report. So you can see in the corner, we did have someone from Canada included in here. One thing to note, we did find some studies that captured multiple events or multiple trails in an area. So you see a concentration, for example, around West Virginia. There was some research there that pointed out the economic benefits of multiple sites and multiple events there. So we did see in the research that special events like festivals and organized races can amplify the economic benefits of mountain biking to a community. Things like bike festivals, criterium races, cross-country races, and other multi-sport races attract the participants, but also spectators that come to support them, and both are spending money on food and lodging. So we highlight several events in the report, including this one in West Virginia, where they found the average spending per rider ranged from $146 to $360 for each event. And these events attract riders in the thousands. This one attracted nearly 7,300 riders, plus their guests and spectators. And the total economic impact across all the events, the direct impact was $4 million. But another thing that we wanted to make sure we captured, and something that's very important to Trust for Public Land, is the indirect economic benefits. So I mentioned health, community, equity, those components of our mission. So instead of just focusing on tourism, we want people to recognize that these mountain biking trails, natural surface trails, have things that benefit the community beyond what people are spending in restaurants and retail. There's positive health outcomes, including physical and mental, which in turn leads to reduced healthcare spending. There's increased social connectedness. Mountain bikers often they place a very high importance on mountain biking because it's an important part of their identity. We see an improved quality of life. We're helping to attract and retain residents by having outdoor recreation access nearby. And by providing these trails at free to low cost, there's increased recreational value. Maybe somebody would have traveled further and spent more to go to a trail system, but now they have one near home. We also find that trails like parks provide increased property value to the homes nearby. But it's also important for us to consider, who is benefiting from this. Often it's residents, but maybe they're not cyclists. So we're trying to think about ways that planning for natural surface trails can incorporate nearby residents or help get them on the trails. Nearby business owners may benefit. People who travel to the area may benefit. So it's important to recognize what the benefits are, but also who those benefits are going to. So I'm going to pass it back to Mary to talk about some of the case studies that we looked at and that IMBA has worked on.
Thanks, Jen. We looked at a couple different case studies across the country. The first one we're going to talk about is the Kingdom Trails in Vermont. They generate an estimated 10.5 million in annual economic impact, driven by 94,000 visitors each year. The average visitor spends $151 per day, directly benefiting locals, lodging, restaurants, and retail. From 2009 to 2019, membership sales grew an average of 15% annually, reaching 150,000 members by 2019, demonstrating strong demand and local support. Notably, 84% of trail users come from out of state, staying an average of 2.7 days. And this influx supports the regional economy while sustaining the trail network itself. Next, we're going to talk about Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chattanooga's 85.5 miles of trails attract over 44,000 visitors annually, including nearly 17,000 non-local visitors. Each visitor contributes an average of $369 per trip, resulting in $7.4 million annual in economic contribution to the local economy. These visits generate over $500,000 in local and state taxes, plus another $537,000 in federal taxes. Trails have become a vital part of the region's economic and tourism strategy, proving the return on investment in outdoor infrastructure. And as Jen was talking about, trails don't just bring economic gains, they also strengthen communities and improve well-being. Mountain biking fosters trail connection by encouraging group rides and shared outdoor experiences. It connects people to nature, builds identity, and creates a sense of belonging. Outdoor adventure sports like mountain biking are proven to increase physical and mental health, support youth engagement, and foster pride in place. Trails also retain residents, attract workforce talent, and even increase property values, contributing to a stronger, healthier, and more connected community. Outdoor adventure recreation, whether it's mountain biking, climbing, or paddling, offers more than adrenaline or exercise. These activities provide a sense of identity, especially for people who feel most themselves outdoors, pushing limits and exploring natural spaces. They also build community, uniting people through shared passion, mutual support, and the camaraderie that comes with challenge and discovery. For many, these activities deliver a profound feeling of well-being, combining physical benefits with emotional resilience. There's also a powerful restorative quality. Time on the trail or water allows people to unplug, reset, and reconnect with what matters. Trails and outdoor access aren't just amenities, they're essential infrastructure for healthier, more vibrant lives. There's a ripple effect of trail access. The proximity to trails does more than offer a convenient place to recreate. It actively shapes the health and prosperity of a community. Easy access to nature is linked to improved physical and mental well-being, fostering strong social connections and healthier lifestyles. Trails also play a key role in attracting and retaining residents, particularly young people and a quality workforce seeking livable, active communities. These quality of life benefits translate into real economic gains. Greater demand for homes near trails, a rise in property tax revenue that directly supports local services. Simply put, investing in trails is an investment in community resilience, economic vitality, and long-term livability.
So the report does two things. One, it talks about these benefits of the economic benefits of the trails and mountain biking, but we also wanted to provide guidance to rural communities in particular who are considering investing in natural surface trails. So the first half of the report focuses on the literature review and its findings, but the second half talks about best practices and these planning considerations for natural surfaces. So one thing we did was to review TPL's trail initiatives and some of our past projects to identify what our key challenges are for rural communities. The number one thing that came up time and time again was identifying suitable lands and making sure there's access to it. In addition, securing funding for the trail network, especially trying to find a diversity of funding. What's the distance to your major population centers? When we're talking about attracting visitors from further away, what's their access like? Is there an airport nearby? Are they driving? Are there cities nearby that maybe you could jointly market this destination? We also are encouraging rural communities to think about emergency service access. Is there cell phone access at the destination so that they can call for help if they need it? What is the opportunities for emergency services to engage with planners early on in order to make sure they have the access they need to help riders? We are also encouraging rural communities to consider equitable and inclusive access to outdoor recreation in terms of designing, building, programming, and marketing the trail system. It's also important to think about the potential changes in community dynamics when introducing natural surface trails and a potential influx of second homeowners or visitors. The short-term rental market, for example, can have significant impacts on the local housing market. The ability of local infrastructure to meet demand. I know where I live on Cape Cod, of course, there's a big influx in the summer of visitors, and that puts a strain on things like our transportation network and our wastewater network. So it's important to think about planning for peak flow, for your peak visitation. Potential negative impacts on the environment, making sure the trails are designed well and designed properly to minimize those effects. And thinking about and thinking through communications to resolve trail user conflict. It's not an if, but a when, but making sure there's communication and appropriate trail planning in order to minimize that conflict. When we're thinking about best practices for rural outdoor recreation planning, TPL encourages consideration in workforce and multifamily housing. Like I mentioned, the seasonal homeowners and tourist economy can significantly impact the local housing market. So thinking about that early on is important. We also recommend leveraging professional trail builders to help resolve some of those issues before they come up. Planning for inclusive programming could include BIPOC and adaptive mountain biking advocates as early stakeholders, making sure that we're considering ways to encourage mountain biking in communities that may not sort of naturally fit into that mode right now. But there's programs I've seen where they're able to provide gear to school-age children, or the trails are designed in such a way that adaptive bikes can safely and easily use those trails. I mentioned regional destination marketing. So instead of trying to attract visitors to one small trail, think about what else is in the region so that people can collaborate and share their marketing resources in order to attract people to maybe a smaller trail system. We encourage people to communicate early and often, including online, sharing safety information before people visit, as well as at the trailhead so they know what they're getting into, and coordinating emergency access through the trail planning process to make sure emergency services are able to respond when needed. Next, there's also a section on if the focus is your outdoor recreation economy. There are many communities that previously focused on resource extraction, like timber, that might be finding the need to sort of pivot and focus more on the outdoor recreation economy as a transformative opportunity for a community. So what we've seen through our work is the importance of identifying and beginning with a robust cross-sector collaborative stakeholder process from the beginning. And that ties to number 3, identifying your trail champions who live in the community and can help move that process forward because it can be a long one. 2, focus on connecting trails to existing assets. We've heard some great stories of businesses that are choosing to co-locate near trailheads because they know that they can get somebody into the brewery, for example, once they get off the trail, or connecting to Main Street and the businesses that are located there. Number 4, collecting baseline economic data. I find that very important because when I'm working with the community to identify what the economic benefits or return on investment is of investment in natural surface trails, it's important to have data to compare a before and after to. So collecting information on visitors, visitor spending, hotel stays, how many people might be biking now in your community. You could do something like a resident survey. And being able to track those changes over time can help grow partnerships and funding for your community. Again, we are always going to raise the flag on the importance of inclusivity and trail planning and programming, again, to help with ridership and helping with connecting everyone to the outdoors, underline the everyone, and being mindful early and often about the potential for conflicts. So if you are working on a mountain biking trail, places where you can find support for your project. Of course, Trust for Public Land has an excellent trails initiative. We have field offices across the country, as well as the research capabilities at the Lab for Land and People. So I know my contact information is shared at the end of this session, and I believe also in the follow-up email. So if you think finding a particular site, identifying land suitable for natural surface trails, conservation and permanent protection, that is something we're happy to help with. Trails are Common Ground is an active coalition that can help identify potential partners for moving mountain biking trails forward. Working with your local mountain biking clubs, the Professional Trail Builders Association, and of course, American Trails, like these webinars and presentations. I'm also a huge fan of the work that the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable has been doing around rural outdoor recreation economy. There's a link down here to learn about best practices that you can apply in your community, as well as share some of the stories that you have based on what you're working on. I know the EPA in the past has had an excellent recreation economy for rural communities program. I love reading up on the strategies that they put together and sort of the consultant approach they take to guiding communities through establishing a strategy and implementation. The USDA also has recreation economy research on their website. There was an excellent report published a few years ago. That's where I learned about some of the work going on in Oak Ridge, Oregon, and how they transitioned from a previously timber-focused economy after the sawmills closed down to shifting towards mountain biking, and they ultimately got included in this report. So I wanted to give a plug for some of that as well. I'm going to briefly pass it back to Mary to talk about some of IMBA's work in this space as well.
Good, thanks, Jen. IMBA offers several levels of support from education, resources, organizational planning, community engagement, and Trail Solutions, which is a division which offers planning, design, and construction. There will be a Trail Accelerator grant that opens up in fall for planning, and all details are at IMBA.com. In addition, we offer in-person events, including one called Trail Labs Foundation. The next in-person will be in October in Duluth, and it attracts experts and community leaders and guides the audience on how to build your trail team and prepare for the trail development process, also found on the website.
So with that, we want to say thank you so much for attending the webinar. Here is mine and Mary's contact information, our email, and the QR code again connects to the report if you would like to download that on your phone. But I think from here, we're going to transition back to Candace for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you, Mary. Really appreciate it. We have plenty of time for Q&A, and we only have a couple questions. So I encourage attendees, if they have any questions, to please share them in the Q&A box now. But I will go ahead and ask the first question. Dan is asking, does the guidance document discuss the issue of the mountain biking community becoming more discerning as more mountain bike destination developments have become available? You can see that question just in case you want to reread that.
There we go. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking in the chat. That's a great question. I don't know if we use that language specifically, but we are encouraging sort of taking a holistic approach to the planning. So if we're looking at building a trail because people are sort of thinking, I feel like what we're seeing is and seeing in the research is that people are thinking about sort of a family-friendly approach, right? So some of the examples we looked at, maybe not everyone in the family is a mountain biker, but people seem to be choosing locations that also have maybe shopping downtown, or they have hiking trails nearby, or there's somewhere to go kayaking. So we are encouraging that the regional destination marketing I flagged is one potential solution for when people are maybe not a family of mountain bikers, but are looking for a few things that the group can do.
Thanks, Jen. I'll also add, Dan, that if you look at the IMBA website, you'll find that there are designations. More will be released, but right now you can look at the Trail Friendly Community Assessment, and that is a direction to help communities understand that it is about more than what you're saying. It's about the total experience when you come to the community. So it is the trail, it is the coffee shop, it is all those amenities that towns are seeking in order to develop the recruitment essentially for mountain bikers to know about their town. And more of that information will be coming out at the end of the year as IMBA releases some new designation information.
Great. Question from Kendra. Great presentation. Thank you so much. Can the links to the research papers that Jen mentioned be added here? Were those, just not sure, just confirming if those were any links that you guys provided, and I can definitely share that, or if it's a new link, I can share with the attendees.
So two things. Yeah, the links to some of the reports I mentioned are in the resources section of the report. So if you need it like in the next 5 minutes, I would scan that QR code and go to that report link. But otherwise, I can share them with Candace to have them included in the email.
Great. And Joel is asking if there's any best management practices for emergency access, or is this in the guidance document?
Do you want to take that one, Mary?
In this specific report, there's not information about emergency access, but there is some best management approach. And if you would like to email me, Joel, I can have the Trail Solutions team provide you some information on that.
Okay. Jim is asking if do you have OHM, motorized single track, where you are, and do you have, or where you are, and do you have data on that as well? We need that info to promote the OHM/OHV in our state. He's in Pennsylvania.
Hi, Jim. And so specifically, when you speak of motorized single track, are you talking about EMTVs or motorcycles? Because those are managed differently by the land managers. If you're talking specifically about OHV and motorcycles, we don't have that information handy, but we have information about best practices for EMTVs and some information that I can share with you on that.
Great. He mentioned off-highway motorcycles.
Okay.
See that yep. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Gosh, a lot of questions came in. So Casey is asking, what's the most surprising or interesting finding that you came across in the new mountain biking economic report?
I'll take that one first. So, one of the things that I actually thought was great, having just gone to the International Trail Summit, so Mary and I were able to share the report with the attendees, and it was sort of the first time we had a chance to share it in public. And just after, or just before the presentation, I attended a session on a trail system in Michigan, the Redhead, I think it's either Redhead Mountain or Redhead Park. And it's a former mining community. And they had figured out a way, even though they didn't have permanent access to these lands, to develop mountain biking trails and basically establish a nascent mountain biking tourism industry, and figuring out a way to work with the owner of the lands who had maintained their mineral rights, but also develop the trails. And they had done an economic benefit study, and it came out to, I think, like $459 per visit, or 400. It was almost in the exact same range of what our findings were in the first 13 studies. So it was great to see some on the ground confirmation, but also to learn another case study of where people are really investing in outdoor recreation as a way to make transformative economic change in their community.
And Peggy is asking, for the report, do you know how the data was gathered? Was it in person, on-site surveys, online surveys?
That's a good question. So that varied by site. This report itself was a literature review, so we were pulling in existing data. Like I mentioned, there was about 55 studies that we originally read. IMBA had collected a lot of that over the course of the past few years, and TPL worked to sift through that to make sure it was the lens of recent, natural surface, mountain biking focused. But each of those individual studies was conducted differently. Some were intercept trails where people were on the trails with a clipboard. Some were surveys conducted, I believe, on single tracks, and some were working with a data provider like Longwoods or Dean Runyon, who do tourism marketing specifically. So they're able to get things like visitor expenditures, what are people spending on hotels and lodging and food, and applying that to the mountain biking context. So it varied by site.
Great. And Chris is asking, is there any suggestions or resources for developing a tourism model for an existing network in a major metropolitan area, New York City Metro, for a large network primarily utilized by locals within a 50-mile radius? And he's asking this because he's trying to determine the distance riders are willing to travel in the same region to different riding sites.
There are actually many tourism models, and the other thing I would point Chris back to would be the upcoming designations, because there will be a designation specifically around tourism that will help assess how many trails are in the area, what type of restaurants and coffee shops and things like that are available. And if Chris wants to reach out, I can also email him some examples and tourism models.
Great, great.
Candace, there was a question about from Lawrence about municipalities.
Sure. Yep.
And specifically asking which city staffers would be the best for them to work with to create a study of economic value of our trails. Jen and I have talked about there are some baseline studies for economic approaches that we can direct Lawrence to, but in addition, the economic development and the Parks and Rec director would be most helpful in providing the information that you're going to need for the baseline study. How many acres are they tracking? How many trail users are there? What type of tools do they have to do that? And then there are some very good do-it-yourself economic impact reports as well. Jen, if you want to talk about some of that, maybe that would help Lawrence out.
Sure. Yeah, we actually we're doing what TPL calls a community of practice right now, and the focus is on economic vitality. And a community of practice is basically a monthly meeting, a virtual meeting where we have peer-to-peer conversations with cities across the US on various topics. And in our last session on economic vitality, we had the speaker, Michelle from Harbinger Consultancy, who's done some excellent work where she's provided guidance on if you have really, really limited resources and you're trying to figure out how to do this on your own, here's the guidance on what questions to ask, who to ask them of, the kind of data to collect, what are the federal data collection resources you can lean on, or the state resources. And I think she actually originally developed that in collaboration with the Wisconsin Office of Outdoor Recreation. So there's some really great examples of where that's been ground truthed as well. So I will also drop that in the chat.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
And I've been talking to Michelle and those at Wisconsin Outdoor Office of Recreation. That will be a webinar sometime later this year. I think sometime later this year. So great. Awesome. Molly's asking if the report includes or compares investment costs to payback.
That's a great question, and I hope it's actually my next report. So one thing that TPL does is return on investment studies, so we're able to give the dollar returned per dollar invested, but that was sort of outside the scope of this particular report. So we just focused on the benefit side, not benefits and costs.
Great. And Ben's asking if you did a comparative analysis between mountain biking and other activities.
Not yet. That's the other next step I'm hoping for. These are I feel like these are planted. So this is the first time that we have done an economic benefits of a particular outdoor recreation type. But my dream is to actually start creating a library where we focus on first mountain biking, but maybe then hiking, and then eventually kayaking or water-based sports. And so there could be several in which we could build that comparison off of.
Great. Great. Okay. Zach is asking, we have 401k earmarked and 503 acres of town-owned land for a mountain biking project. Are there any tools or connections that we could leverage to determine whether or not the land is viable? It's fairly steep prior to spending money on planning and designs.
So basically, I think what he's asking for is there an assessment to know if the geography, topography, the location of the land is something that they should purchase. Is that, I think, what he's asking, Candace? So if it's not planning and design, there are some pre-planning. There are agencies, and I know Trail Solutions does a pre-planning. So it's not the full out planning and design, but you could talk with the Trail Solutions team about a pre-planning assessment to see if the location can deliver on what you're hoping it can, the types of trails, access, and the other amenities that you're hoping to develop.
Great. Let's see. Quite a few questions, so I'm just scanning through here. Beaupre, if I pronounced that correctly, or maybe to James. Do you have any advice for a community that has originally bought into the economic and health benefit to the community, but then backtracked due to vocal minority who don't want outsiders and more visitors in their rural area?
Well, this is something I guess many people run up against Beaupre, so we understand the struggle. But I think the if you have the political will and you have in general the community buy-in, if there's any way you can address what people don't want, if there's mitigation you can do, if there's communication, if there's help in planning, that would address what the issues are, you probably have to go back to the drawing board, have some more community engagement meetings to understand what the concerns are. Because if they originally bought in, you probably have some good sources of support. And then you go back to the drawing board and figure out what's blocking the encouragement of developing the trails.
Udo is asking, how do you account for the volunteer trail builders and managers' work when establishing your financial metrics? While the cost is zero, their contribution to mountain biking trails ecosystems is not.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a wonderful question, Udo. There are state volunteer rates. So in Colorado, they have a rate for what a volunteer hour is worth. And so if you're tracking your volunteer hours, which all organizations should be doing, then you should be submitting a report for the value based on how the average that your state has. If your state doesn't have one, you can look it up for what other states closest to you might. And publishing that information, going to city council or county meetings to say, this is what our organization did and what we contributed back to the community, and here's the financial work that we did. And that would include even, your tools and investments that you're making to deliver on trail construction and maintenance should be tallied and shared with your community so they understand the great impact that your organization is delivering to your community.
Mm-hmm. Katie's asking, how were the indirect contributions in relation to increased property values determined?
So in the report, I wouldn't say that they were put next to each other as a comparison. We were just focused on identifying both. So we wanted to say, there are studies, they're called hedonic studies, where people look at a change in a system, in this case, the establishment of a trail, and what does that mean for nearby property values. So typically the data has shown that trails that are high quality, well maintained, are contributing anywhere from 5 to more than 15% of a market over the market value of the home. So we recognize that, of course, can be a double-edged sword and can contribute to some of the housing issues that we did flag in the report. But the indirect contributions, I might be misunderstanding, but we were thinking about, it's not just the direct tourism dollars, but also what are the ripple effects in terms of the benefits, like social connectedness, the physical health benefits, mental health benefits. But if I'm misunderstanding, please feel free to clarify.
Great. Okay. Let's see. Elliot's asking about the thoughts on economic benefits of mountain biking trails and systems that are bikeable via multi-use trails and greenways from dense urban areas.
You want to start, Mary?
Sure. I don't think the study necessarily distinguished from where it starts. It were, we have various examples of economic impact of areas across the country that might be urban versus rural, but the trail networks in these areas are a combination of multi-use trails and purpose-built trails. But I think that question is very specific, and that wasn't exactly the way the study was put together, right, Jen?
Yeah, so I had answered another question in the chat I typed an answer to this where we were talking about trails that are defined as natural surface trails versus trails that might also have like a paved component. We didn't identify any economic benefits differently between the two. To the extent that we could, we were trying to focus on the mountain biking. So that's why the paved trails or the trails in the more dense urban areas were excluded, because often those were more road cycling focused, or at least road bike focused. So yeah, we didn't necessarily identify like one provided more benefits versus the other.
Okay. And this is a good follow-up question from John, which may be a same or similar answer, but how would you stratify and differentiate the different kinds of mountain biking, such as challenge levels, trail types, etc.?
Sure. We have a whole system for differentiating the types of mountain biking. If that's something, John, that I can send to you, if you email me, I'm happy to share it with you.
Okay, great. Paul is asking, for mountain bike trail networks that are managed by municipalities, do you have any partnership agreement best practices between clubs, volunteer groups, and the managers that have been successful for community destinations?
Yes, same for Paul. If he wants to email me, we can send him a template.
Great. And James is asking, do state government agencies frequently sponsor or fund these mountain biking trails in state parks or other facilities, or are these privately funded?
Typically, the best way is that it's a collaborative approach, and that the organization that's on the ground is working with their land managers to determine where that funding can come from. And if it's not federal land or state land or municipal land, and that the organization can come to the table with money, then that is obviously very helpful. But there are some state parks who absolutely are funding trails in collaboration with organizations that might be building and or maintaining them.
Okay. Jim's asking if any of the single track trail systems that you know of are open to or currently shared use, such as, also equestrians, motorcycles, hiking, e-bikes, etc.
There are multi-use trail networks across the United States, and then what's on that land is determined by the land managers. Historically, trails are divided by motorized and non-motorized, and there are many examples of shared use and purpose-built. Not necessarily all the users that are mentioned in this example here, but the trail network can have a shared use trailhead. And then from there are zones of which various types of trail users could go out and have their experience.
Okay. Kendra's asking if the research uncovered regular instances of trail user conflict, in particular between hikers and mountain bicyclists, and if so, is there any difference in projected economic impacts between these user groups?
That's a great question. So I feel like the studies that we focused on really, a lot of them were very tourism focused, so they weren't going to talk too much about the trail conflicts. So the information we had in the report on trail user conflicts was really driven by IMBA's experiences and TPL's experiences and what we've seen on the ground. So unfortunately, I can't really talk to the projected economic impacts, but once I am able to tackle that next chapter of the library on the economic impacts of hiking, I think I'll have a better answer for you.
Carl's mentioned that the Texas Land Conservancy has acquired about 300 acres in their town that seem well suited to mountain biking trails, and they indicate an interest in doing trails. Where do we start, especially with finding funding?
Carl, if you want to reach out to me, I can help you with some suggestions on where to start and the planning that you're asking about.
Great. And I see. Oh, go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
going to say, same for me. If you would like to email my email as well, I can connect you to our Trails Initiative director. We do have an office in Texas as well, so we can have some on-the-ground Texas experience as well as our national trails experience that we can share with you.
Great. John Johnny's asking if you can speak to the impact that tariffs have or has or will have on the future of the mountain biking industry specifically and its potential to impact trail building efforts, for mountain biking tourism, communities that have embraced mountain biking as an economic driver, et cetera.
I can try. So I think there's a few things to think about. One, I think the number one thing that I'm seeing in response to that is just the uncertainty, right? So I think a lot of people are finding it challenging to invest when they're uncertain about what these impacts ultimately are going to be. So that might affect funding availability, it might affect grant availability. Of course, the impact to our federal partners has been fairly extreme. So there might be challenges on that scale. If you've been working with groups like US EPA or USDA, Department of Agriculture, then tourism, I'm not sure how that's going to get affected. I think on the one hand, people might be looking similar to 2020, people might be looking for recreation closer to home. So I think there actually could be opportunity here for the outdoor recreation economy. And investing in trails is going to really benefit nearby residents, if not attracting people from further away. So I don't think it's necessarily going to have a negative impact on people that have the communities that have really embraced mountain biking as an economic driver. But I think the uncertainty of the situation is going to be harder to do the longer term planning and trail building. But that's me without my crystal ball.
Chris is asking if the 85 miles of trail referenced in the Chattanooga case study was all within the city.
I'd have to double check to get back to him. My guess would be it was all accessible from the city, but I'd have to look at property lines to know if it was actually all in the city. We'd be happy to provide more details if interested.
Okay. Lind is asking if mentioning that mountain biking is an inherently expensive activity. With TPL and IMBA's mission to increase access for all, how do the organizations aim to break down barriers to entry, particularly equipment?
This is a great question, Lynn. Many people are addressing this on the programming side. And there are really great examples. IMBA has a coordinator on the Navajo Nation, and they have worked with many bike companies to receive product, mountain bike, helmet, shoes, and various donations to increase access. And I've seen dozens of examples of this across the country of those organizations that are doing the programming that are also obtaining donations in order to make it more accessible. This is a great question.
Great. Okay, I think, we will have time for one more question. Jim is asking if any other states require mountain biking registration and collect fees that can be dedicated to investment in expanding the sport, such as snowmobiling and such as what snowmobiling and ATV typically does.
I don't have those examples, but it's a question that comes up a lot in terms of funding for trails and how that could be developed from a registration. And there are some creative ways that people are thinking about it, but I don't have any solid examples off the top of my head.
Okay. Great. Well, appreciate all of the great questions that came in from the attendees and answering all of the questions. So thank you so much, Jen and Mary. And again, thank you so much for the presentation. The slide that you see here will be shared in my follow-up email with all attendees. Their names will be linked to their emails if you did not catch their email on the previous two slides. And of course, you can always follow up with American Trails, and I can share their information if you have a follow-up question for either of the presenters. And again, I also want to thank our webinar partners that include iZone Imaging, the Professional Trail Builders Association, the Grisberger Fund, 5280 Creative, the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, and the USDA Forest Service. And again, we hope you will consider donating to American Trails or becoming a member to help keep these webinars produced weekly and free to everyone. Visit americantrails.org/join for membership and donation options. And again, a special thank you to our Trail Champion members, including Trail Design Specialists, Pilot Rock by R.J. Thomas Manufacturing Company, Kansas Trails, VacriSign, as well as the Forest Preserve District of DuPage County. And we hope you'll join us for our next webinar in the American Trails Advancing Trails webinar series, and the reminders to subscribe and support American Trails on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/American Trails, where all of the recordings are housed. So thank you again to everyone for attending. I hope